A good Sunday to you, and happy Mother's Day to every mother. Negotiations over how to raise the federal debt ceiling got underway 3 days ago as congressional Republicans and Democrats began meeting in talks chaired by Vice President Joe Biden. When the current limit is reached, technically a week from tomorrow, the government will need to find $125 billion a month in order to pay its bills. The Treasury expects it can get by with smoke and mirrors until early next August. Congressman Jason Chaffetz serves as a member of the House Budget Committee. Welcome to Sunday Edition.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, this debt ceiling is sort of like the credit limit on the family credit card, and that debt comes from spending decisions we've already made, from money that's been spent. So why is there so much posturing in Congress right now about making the raising the debt ceiling contingent upon doing other things with short-term spending priorities?
Well, we got to remember that about 95% of our GDP is now in debt, and we can no longer afford it. We're paying over $600 million a day in interest on that debt, and we have to make some systemic changes. We just can't afford it. We got to cut up that credit card and start going a different direction. And there are those of us that understand we probably will have to raise the debt ceiling, but we have to change the trajectory. We just can't keep adding to the debt indefinitely.
But we still have that debt obligation of whether we raise the debt ceiling or not, correct?
Well, but as Senator Toomey has pointed out, that if you put the full faith and credit of the United States on the line and make sure that you pay those interest payments, if you pay the Social Security and pay those pertinent issues first, then you can make the alterations to some of that discretionary spending, which has just grown just exponentially over the years. But
timing is so critical. Doesn't this entangle an issue that requires immediate attention with some matters that probably won't be resolved before the elections next year?
Well, but we can't keep punting this down the road. I mean, one of the frustrations, I'm fairly new to Congress, and when I went there, is they just keep punting this down the road. We keep raising the debt ceiling, It's always election year, so there's always an excuse not to do it. But there are those of us that are new saying, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And if we're going to have to tie this to a balanced budget amendment or something serious where we actually change the trajectory, then we're going to need to use this deadline in order to get to that point.
Should it be tied to a balanced budget amendment?
No, I'd love the idea. Congress has shown through the years on both sides of the aisle that they have no discipline in order to actually balance the budget. And so, yes, I think we're going to have a dramatic change like a balanced budget amendment.
Well, your fellow Utah Republican Mike Lee says no how, no way will he vote to raise the debt limit unless it is accompanied by a balanced budget amendment. Is that your position?
I think that's one of the options.
No, is that your position?
I would agree with that, but I think there are some other options as well. Yeah, I think there are other things you can do, too, to tie it to spending caps and those types of things. Some worry that if you create an excuse that some will want to just have tax increases. I want to tie it in such a way that there aren't tax increases. I think we're borrowing, taxing, and spending too much money already. We're spending about 25 cents out of every dollar that's spent in this country is spent by the federal government. So if you can tie it to some spending limits and get those below 20%, that's something I would support. That doesn't have to be in a balanced budget amendment. It can be in a different method.
Now, the debt ceiling happens to be the topic of this week's KSL editorial. I'd like to run that, then give you the opportunity to respond to it. So here's KSL's editorial director, Consaras.
Congressional Republicans, particularly the so-called Tea Party contingent, are threatening to vote against raising the nation's debt ceiling. They're playing a game of chicken with enormously high stakes, and it's not a productive way to deal with the nation's debt crisis. If Congress fails to raise the debt ceiling in an upcoming vote, the United States, for the first time, will not be able to meet its debt obligations. The solvency of the U.S. is the cornerstone of the world's financial system. If America defaults, there could be a tsunami-sized domino effect, and the result could be a financial collapse that would dwarf the crisis of 2008. Several Republicans have said they will not vote to raise the ceiling unless there are corresponding commitments to reduce debt long term. Others have said the vote should be tied to a balanced budget amendment. The nation's debt situation is no doubt scary, and polls show most Americans want the people they have sent to Washington to make debt reduction a top priority. But it's a problem that transcends partisanship. The solution will require long-term focus, diligence, and a willingness to make politically difficult decisions. It is not a time for grandstanding, and the vote on the debt ceiling should not be viewed as an opportunity to make a point. The point that the debt crisis needs to be dealt with is already well taken. KSL encourages Utah's congressional delegation to seek a constructive, not a destructive approach to the problem and avoid the temptation to cast a symbolic vote on a matter with real-world implications. For the KSL editorial board, I'm Consaras.
That's one point of view. What's your response to that?
I agree with most of that. I agree with the 3 points that are laid out. I don't think anybody, myself, Senator Lee, and others, nobody's grandstanding. I think we're taking this so seriously, saying we're not going to keep punting this down the road. We have to deal with it right now. No longer can we say, oh, well, we'll get through the presidential elections. That's why we're in this mess. And there are those of us who believe that if we don't make the changes right now, right here today, that in the years to come, which are coming up very quickly, the bond markets and others are going to panic because they're going to realize that we're going to be like Greece, where our debt will get to 125% of GDP. We're already at 95%. We can no longer play games, and I would hope that others would have that same sort of urgency that Mike Lee and I have right now.
In response to that, Khan used the word game of political chicken. Do you acknowledge that? Is that happening at any level?
Hey, look, the issues that we have before Congress, it is a high-stakes game, no doubt about it. But there's nothing like a deadline that will actually drive you to make these types of decisions. And so as I talked to Speaker Boehner just in the last 2 days, he saw this. He said, in my 20 years in the United States Congress, I've never seen a situation like this where we actually have an opportunity to make the major systemic changes over the coming decades that will really get us back on that path to not only balance the debt, balance the budget, but actually pay off the debt. And that's what we're trying to do.
So what is the price of Jason Chaffetz's vote to raise the debt limit?
I don't have a price. It's not for sale. What I'm trying to do is get this country back in some sort of fiscal sanity. I wish I could balance the budget in the next year. I know we can't do that.
But on
we
an up or down
vote,
would you vote to raise the debt limit to $2 trillion, as Geithner suggests, just without any other strings
unilaterally?
attached?
Absolutely not. That would exacerbate.
Okay, so what else would have to be there for your vote?
Well, we got to be changing that trajectory, so we're not only paying off that debt or getting the deficit down to zero, but that we're actually paying off the debts that we owe. That's just the American way. We ought to live within our means, right? We have been using this government credit card and just keep racking it up. In February alone, the shortest month of the year, we had a federal deficit of $220 billion. We can't afford to continue to do this.
Okay, we got 15 seconds. How do you see this playing out over the course of the next 4 months?
I think we're going to get an initial up or down vote, and I will probably vote no, because if it's not changed to any ties, then I won't vote for it. And then we'll probably come back later in the summer, June or July, and actually cut some spending.
Cut some spending and
raise the debt ceiling. Yeah.
All right, Congressman Jason Chaffetz, thank you very much for joining us today. Up next.